The May sun was already burning hot over the cornfields of Davenport, Iowa. It was 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and the cloudless sky promised another dry, hot day, perfect for the harvest that couldn't stop. At Riverside Farm, one of the largest corn producers in the region, activity had been intense since before dawn. Dozens of workers were preparing for another day of work when the sound no one wanted to hear echoed across the fields, a metallic grinding followed by heavy silence. The John Deere S780 combine, the pride of the farm and responsible for processing over 800 tons of corn per day, had stopped. It wasn't a normal stop. It was the kind of silence that made any farmer's heart freeze. "No, no, no!" shouted Mr. William Harrison, the farm owner, running toward the machine stopped in the middle of the field. At 58 years old, grey hair wet with sweat and plaid shirt soaked, he had the expression of someone watching a nightmare materialize. "This can't be happening now." The combine operator, Jake, a 40-year-old man with 20 years of experience, climbed down from the cab with a pale face. "Boss, it just locked up out of nowhere. I was cutting normal when a strange noise started in the hydraulic system. I tried to continue, but it just died. Won't even start now." William climbed onto the machine and tried to start it. Nothing. Just a dry click and silence. He climbed down, wiped the sweat from his face, and looked at the horizon. Thousands of acres of mature corn waiting to be harvested. Each day of delay meant losses. Overripe corn loses sugar. Rain could come. The processing plant had contracts to fulfill. "Call Big Mike from the shop in town," he ordered, trying to stay calm, "and call John Deere in Des Moines. This has to be fixed today. Today." Meanwhile, 10 miles away, in the small mechanical shop Thompson and Daughter, at the entrance to Davenport, Julia Thompson was wiping her hands with an old rag stained with oil. At 35 years old, she had a lean but strong body from working hard every day, brown hair always pulled back in a tight ponytail, and green eyes that could identify a mechanical problem just by sound. The shop was small but impeccably organized. Tools hung in order, parts catalogued, a cooperative calendar on the wall. In the corner, an old faded photo showed a smiling couple next to a little girl, all three covered in grease, in front of a green tractor. "All done, Mr. Peterson," she called to the customer waiting outside. "Your tractor is good as new. It was just the fuel injection valve that was clogged. I cleaned the entire circuit, changed the filters, and adjusted the pressure. It'll run smooth now." The old farmer, a man of almost 70 years, entered limping with his cane. "Julia, girl, you're just like your husband, God rest his soul. I took this tractor to 3 shops before coming here. One said it was the whole engine, wanted to charge me $15,000. Another talked about replacing the injection pump, another $8,000. And you, in half an hour, fixed it." Julia smiled, but there was an old sadness in that smile. "My husband always said, 'Jules, mechanics isn't about memorizing manuals. It's about understanding how things talk to each other. It's listening to what the machine is trying to tell you.' I learned that from him, Mr. Peterson." If you're enjoying this story and want to help me continue bringing content like this, please subscribe to the channel. I'm working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and each subscription makes all the difference. It's quick, it's free, and you help me continue sharing these stories of overcoming in real life. Click that red subscribe button and turn on notifications. You can't imagine how much this means to me. Let's go on this journey together. And don't forget to leave a like and comment where you're watching from. The shop phone rang. Julia answered. "Thompson and Daughter, good morning." It was Mrs. Harrison, William's wife. "Julia, the combine at the farm broke down. William is desperate. Can you take a look?" Julia felt her heart race. She knew that machine, knew it well. "Mrs. Harrison, of course I can. I just need to grab my tools and—" "Look, honey." The woman's voice became strange, almost embarrassed. "I'm going to be honest with you. William already called Big Mike and contacted John Deere technical support. Specialists are coming from Des Moines and even from Chicago. But I thought, it doesn't hurt for you to take a look too, right? Just in case." Julia swallowed hard. She understood perfectly what wasn't being said. "You can look while we wait for the real men to arrive." "I'll head there now, Mrs. Harrison." She hung up and stood still for a moment, looking at the old photo on the wall. Her husband, Michael Thompson, had been the best agricultural mechanic in the region. He was the one who taught Julia everything. He was the one who, before dying 3 years ago in a farming accident, made sure to leave the shop in her name. "Jules," he had said in the hospital bed, "you're better than me, smarter, more careful, more patient. But the world will test you more too. There'll be people who won't believe in you just because you're a woman. But promise me, never stop doing what you know how to do. Promise." She had promised. When Julia arrived at Riverside Farm half an hour later, driving her old white van full of tools, the scene was one of controlled chaos. The enormous John Deere S780 combine was stopped in the middle of the field, surrounded by men gesturing and arguing. There must have been at least 15 people around, operators, farm mechanics, foremen. She parked the van at a distance and started to get out with her toolbox when she heard the voice. "Julia, what are you doing here?" It was Big Mike, the main mechanic in town, a large man of almost 50 years, prominent belly and an air of superiority. He was there with 2 assistants, all dirty with grease, but hadn't managed to fix anything yet. "Mrs. Harrison called me to take a look at the machine," Julia responded, keeping her voice firm. Big Mike let out a loud laugh. "Marlene called you? Look, sweetheart, this isn't some small producer's tractor. This is a John Deere S780, worth over $500,000. It's got hydrostatic systems, CVT transmission, embedded electronics. This isn't backroad shop mechanics." Julia felt her blood boil, but took a deep breath. "I know exactly what it is, Mike. And I know it's been stopped for over 2 hours already. Each hour stopped is money lost." Mike turned to the other men around. "You see? And to, the little lady knows it's costing money." Laughter. "Look, Julia, you're nice. You fix lawnmowers and old pickups real good in town. But this is serious business. We've got real people coming from Des Moines." Mr. Harrison approached, wiping his sweat. He looked at Julia with a mixture of desperation and embarrassment. "Julia, I appreciate you coming, but look, I already called the authorized service people. They're specialized technicians, you understand. It's nothing personal, but this machine is very complex. It's better if you don't touch anything so you don't complicate it more." "Mr. Harrison, I just need 5 minutes to diagnose," Julia tried. "Get out of here, you're useless," the voice thundered behind her. Julia turned. It was Brett, William's 28-year-old son, recently graduated in business administration and who had returned 6 months ago to modernize the farm. Tall, with expensive sunglasses and a brand-name shirt, he had that typical arrogance of someone who never really got their hands dirty. "You don't understand English," Brett continued, approaching with a look of contempt. "This isn't a place for you. Go fix bicycles, go on." Some laughter. Julia felt her face burn. "Brett, I just want to help. I know I can—" "You know what?" He laughed loudly and others laughed along. "You know how to make things worse. Look, we already have 12 specialists coming here, 12. People with degrees, with certifications, who work with this every day. And you think you're going to show up here and do what? A miracle?" "It's not a miracle, it's knowledge." Julia tried to keep her voice firm. "If you'd just let me look." "Enough!" Brett clapped once, loud as if shooing away a dog. "Nobody asked for your opinion. Nobody asked for your help. Leave, before I get really irritated. Get out of here." The silence that followed was heavy. All the men around fell silent, some looking at the ground with embarrassment, others with hidden smiles. Mr. Harrison opened his mouth as if to say something, but closed it again. Julia looked at the stopped combine, then at Brett, then at all the other men. She felt the toolbox weighing in her hand. For a moment, she thought about simply dropping everything and leaving, but then she remembered the promise she made to her husband. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll leave, but when the 12 specialists can't fix it, you know where to find me." Brett let out an exaggerated laugh. "Did you hear that? When the 12 specialists can't fix it. Such arrogance. Go on, go before I completely lose my patience." Julia walked back to the van under scornful looks and some laughter. She threw the toolbox in the back seat harder than she intended, got in, started the engine. One last time, she looked through the window at the stopped combine. Even from there, she had a suspicion of what it could be. But it didn't matter. Nobody wanted her help. She drove away, raising dust on the dirt road, tears of rage and humiliation burning in her eyes, but refusing to let them fall. Julia drove down the dirt road back to town, hands gripping the steering wheel, jaw clenched, trying to contain the mixture of rage and humiliation burning in her chest. It was almost 9 a.m. and the sun was already strong, making the air shimmer over the cornfield stretching in all directions. When she arrived at the shop, she parked the van haphazardly and sat for a long moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at nothing. "Get out of here, you're useless." The phrase echoed in her head like a slap. It wasn't the first time she'd heard something like that. It wouldn't be the last, but it hurt just the same. It always hurt. She got out, entered the shop and went straight to the small office in the back, a room with an old wooden desk, an ancient computer, stacks of technical manuals, and that photo on the wall. She sat in the chair that had been her husband's and finally allowed the tears to come. "Why, Michael?" she whispered to the photo. "Why does it have to be so hard?" The photo didn't answer, of course. But Julia remembered. She remembered when Michael first brought her to the shop, not long after they got married. She had been a kindergarten teacher, but she'd always been fascinated by how things worked. "You want to learn this?" Michael had asked with that crooked smile she loved. "It's hard work, Jules, dirty, exhausting. I want to learn," she had said firmly. And learn she did. For 10 years she worked alongside Michael. While other wives in town went to book clubs and yoga classes, she was under tractors, covered in grease, learning to read hydraulic diagrams, to feel with her hands the difference between a worn bearing and a good one. When Michael died 3 years ago, crushed when a tractor he was working under slipped off its jack, Julia had cried for weeks. But then she dried her tears and took over the shop. Her husband had left it to her in his will, and she was determined to honor that. The first months were brutal. Customers who had been coming for years simply disappeared when they saw it was a woman running things. "I don't want a woman working on my equipment," some said openly. Others just made excuses and left. But Julia had persisted. She charged less, worked better, solved problems others couldn't. Slowly, very slowly, she built her own reputation. Today, 3 years later, she had loyal customers, small producers mainly, people who didn't have money for the big shops and who learned that this green-eyed woman with grease-stained hands could work miracles with a wrench. But it still wasn't enough. She still wasn't truly respected. And that morning's scene at Riverside Farm had made that painfully clear. The phone rang, pulling Julia from her thoughts. She wiped her eyes, sniffled and answered, trying to sound normal. "Thompson and daughter, good morning." "Julia, thank God you answered." It was Mr. Peterson, her earlier customer. "Look, I'm here at Joe's Diner and everyone's talking about how that big combine at Riverside broke down. Is it true you went there and Harrison's son sent you away?" News travels fast in a small town. "It's true, Mr. Peterson." "What an outrage! That arrogant kid. Look, I'm going to tell you something. That combine is a John Deere S780. I know it. Your husband worked on its installation about 6 years ago. It had problems constantly, and only your husband could fix them. You remember that?" Julia sat up straight in her chair. She remembered. She remembered very well. It had been in 2019. She was 32 at the time, and still working alongside Michael. Riverside Farm had just bought that brand new combine, top-of-the-line pride of the farm, but from the beginning, it gave problems. The hydrostatic transmission would go into protection mode for no apparent reason. John Deere technicians came from Des Moines twice and couldn't fix it. They talked about replacing the entire transmission, an absurd cost. Then Harrison, desperate, had called Michael. Julia had gone with him. She remembered being in the field, under the scorching May sun, watching her husband climb into the cab, start it up, listen to the engine, feel the vibrations. "Jules, come here." She had climbed into the cab. The space was tight, but Michael made room for her. "Feel this?" He had placed her hand on the panel. "Feel that vibration?" "I do. It feels irregular." "Exactly. Now listen." They fell silent. Beyond the rumble of the engine, there was an almost imperceptible noise, a high-pitched hiss that came and went. "Hear that hiss?" "I do." "What is it?" "Air. Where there shouldn't be air. The hydrostatic transmission works with oil under pressure. If there's air in the system, the pressure becomes irregular, and if the pressure becomes irregular, the sensors panic and shut everything down. The John Deere techs didn't find air in the system because they tested the machine while it was stopped. The air only appears when it's working, when the oil is hot, and the system is under maximum pressure. It's an assembly defect. There's probably a connection somewhere that wasn't done right at the factory. A bad seal, small, almost invisible. They had taken 4 hours to find it, a tiny connection between the hydraulic pump and the distributor. The seal ring had been mounted crooked, creating a microchannel through which air entered when the oil heated up. It was so small it was impossible to see with the naked eye. But Michael had found it, replaced the seal, purged the entire system, and the machine had worked perfectly. Harrison had been so grateful, he paid double. And for years, whenever the machine needed maintenance, it was Michael he called. But after Michael died, the calls stopped. The new farm manager preferred to contract with a big shop in Des Moines, and now that day, when the machine had truly broken down, they hadn't even seriously considered that Julia could help. "Mr. Peterson," Julia said on the phone, an idea beginning to form. "What kind of symptoms is the machine showing?" "I don't know, girl. I just know it won't start. They tried to start it and nothing, just a click. Then it went dead." A click. Just a click. Julia closed her eyes, visualizing the S780's electrical system. The starter wasn't engaging. Why? Battery? Unlikely. It was tested regularly. Fuse? Possible, but that was the first thing any mechanic would check. Relay? Also too basic. Unless... Julia stood up suddenly and went to the shelf where she kept technical manuals. She pulled out a thick volume. John Deere S780, Electrical and Hydraulic Systems. She flipped quickly until she found the diagram she was looking for. There it was. The starting system had intelligent protection. It wouldn't allow the starter to function if it detected abnormal hydraulic pressure in any main system. It was protection against damage. If something was wrong in the hydraulic system, the machine simply wouldn't start to avoid greater damage. And which hydraulic system in that specific machine had a history of pressure problems? The transmission. And what would cause sudden pressure loss in the transmission? Julia flipped a few more pages and found the hydrostatic transmission schematic. There was a pressure accumulator, a kind of system shock absorber that maintained stable pressure even with temperature and load variations. That accumulator had an internal membrane made of a special polymer that, over time and heat, could degrade. If the membrane was ruptured, the accumulator couldn't maintain pressure. The system would detect this as a critical failure and enter total protection mode, preventing even starting. But this wouldn't show up in any bench test. It would only appear in the machine operating under real load. And only someone who knew the specific history of that machine would know where to look. Julia looked at the clock. 11:45 a.m. The combine had been stopped for more than 5 hours. She knew she was right. She knew it deep in her soul, with that certainty that came from years working with Michael, listening to him, learning to talk with machines. She picked up her cell phone, thought about calling the farm, put her finger on Mrs. Harrison's number, stood there, undecided. Get out of here. You're useless. Was it worth it? Should she really try to help people who had humiliated her? Julia looked again at the photo of Michael on the wall. She could almost hear his voice. The work speaks louder than prejudice, Jules. Let them laugh. And then you fix what they can't fix. She put away her phone. She wasn't going to call, wasn't going to beg to be heard. But she also wasn't going to give up. She would wait for the 12 specialists to try and fail. And then, when desperation was big enough to overcome prejudice, she would be ready, because she knew exactly what was wrong with that combine, and when her time came, she would prove to all of them what she was capable of. The afternoon at Riverside Farm passed in an atmosphere of growing tension. The May sun burned relentlessly over the cornfields, and with each passing hour, Mr. Harrison felt the losses mounting. The John Deere S780 combine remained stopped in the same place since morning, now surrounded by a true battalion of specialists coming and going like ants around candy. It was 3:30 p.m. when the 8th technician climbed down from the machine's cab, wiping sweat and shaking his head negatively. Harrison felt his stomach turn. "So?" "Mr. Harrison," the technician, a man of about 35 in a John Deere uniform, seemed genuinely embarrassed. "I checked the entire electrical system. Battery is perfect, 13.8 volts. All fuses okay, relays working. The starter itself has no problem. I tested it isolated and it works perfectly. But something won't let it turn on when it's integrated into the machine's system." "But what?" Harrison was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "You're the 8th John Deere specialist who's come here. How can nobody find the problem?" At that moment, 2 more pickup trucks arrived, raising dust. From one, 3 technicians in uniforms from an industrial maintenance company from Iowa City descended. From the other, 2 mechanical engineers Harrison had hired from a specialized consulting firm in Chicago. There were now 14 people trying to solve the problem. Brett, the son, supervised everything with an air of ownership, though he himself couldn't tell a bolt from a nut. He walked back and forth, phone to his ear, trying to look important. "Dad, I brought the best," he said loudly for everyone to hear. "Engineers from Chicago. These guys work with heavy machinery in mining, in construction. If anyone's going to solve this, it's them." Mr. Harrison could only think about the money being thrown away. Each hour of stopped combine, $1,200. Each specialist, $500 daily rate. And there was still pressure from the processing plant calling every hour, asking when the corn would start arriving again. The 2 engineers from Chicago climbed onto the machine with laptops and very sophisticated electronic diagnostic equipment. They connected cables, ran programs, analyzed error codes. "The diagnostic system shows a generic failure in the hydraulic circuit," said one of them after 40 minutes. "But it doesn't specify which circuit or which component." "I already knew that," Harrison exploded. "I need to know how to fix it." The engineers exchanged embarrassed looks. "Mr. Harrison, with all due respect, this system is extremely complex. It has pressure sensors, temperature, viscosity. Any one of them could be sending wrong readings to the onboard computer. To identify which one, we'd need to disassemble piece by piece and test individually. That could take days." Days. Harrison felt his legs go weak. "I don't have days. I have an entire harvest waiting." The John Deere technicians gathered in a corner, discussing among themselves in low voices. Then their leader, a man of about 50 named Morris, who was an official company instructor, approached Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, I called John Deere headquarters in Moline. They're going to send replacement parts by helicopter. We'll replace the entire transmission. It's the safest option." "How long?" "The parts arrive tomorrow morning. The replacement takes about 48 hours. 2 days. Harrison was almost having a fit. "Maurice, for God's sake, isn't there another way?" "It's the safest solution, Mr. Harrison. We can't diagnose exactly what's wrong. So the company protocol is to replace the entire assembly. Either that or we try to guess, which could make it worse." Harrison looked around. 14 specialists, John Deere technicians, engineers from Chicago, award-winning mechanics, people who had certificates hanging on walls. And nobody, absolutely nobody, could identify the damn problem. It was almost 5 p.m. The combine had been stopped for 10 hours. The loss had already passed $12,000, and apparently it would be stopped for 2 more days at a total cost of maybe $50,000, plus the cost of the new transmission, which must be around $75,000, $125,000. For something that might be a simple thing, a $100 component with a defect, but nobody knew which one. Brett was walking toward his father when his cell phone rang. It was one of his college friends who lived in Davenport. "Hey, Brett, saw you guys have a big problem there. The combine is putting on quite a show." "It's all under control," Brett lied. "We've got a bunch of specialists here. We'll fix it soon." "Really?" "Because people here at the bar are saying that even the John Deere techs can't fix it. They said even Julia, that mechanic lady, tried to help, but you sent her away." Brett felt a pang of irritation. "That one? Come on, man. She fixes old trucks. This is a $500,000 machine." "Yeah, but people here are saying her husband knew that specific machine, that he worked on it when it was new." "Don't come at me with that small-town gossip. Female knowledge from a small town against engineers from Chicago? You're kidding me." But something from the conversation kept bothering Brett. He put away his phone and went looking for his father, who was sitting in the shade of a tree, head in hands. "Dad, you remember Michael Thompson, the old mechanic?" Harrison lifted his head. "Michael? Of course I remember. He died a few years ago." "Why?" "His wife came here this morning. That Julia." "I know. Your mother called her. It was you who sent her away yelling." Brett felt slight embarrassment but disguised it. "She had no business here, Dad." "But Michael knew this machine, didn't he?" Harrison was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, as if a veil was being lifted from his memory, he nodded. "He knew it. Knew it well. When we bought this John Deere, it had a chronic problem in the transmission. Official technicians came twice and didn't fix it. They wanted to replace the entire transmission. So I called Michael. He came, spent a few hours, found a factory defect seal that nobody had found, fixed it. After that, whenever there was any serious problem, I called him." "And his wife, she worked with him?" "She did, since they got married. I saw that woman covered in grease more times than in a dress." Harrison paused, looking at the sky. "Michael always said she was smarter than him, that she understood machines in a different way, more deeply." Brett was silent, then tried to rationalize. "Dad, but that doesn't mean anything. She's not a certified technician. She doesn't have formal training, doesn't have a degree, and we have 14 people here with certificates, with years of training." Harrison exploded, standing up abruptly. "And none of them fixed the problem. It's been 10 hours, Brett. 10 hours. And your sister is getting married in 3 months, and I promised to pay for her wedding with this harvest's profit. And your mother needs knee surgery, and there's a loan due at the bank next month. And if this harvest goes down the drain, we're ruined." It was the first time Brett saw his father truly desperate, and it scared him. Harrison had always been the family's rock, always knew how to handle problems. But now, seeing him like this, Brett realized the real gravity of the situation. "What do you want to do?" Harrison took a deep breath. looked at the combine, then at the 14 specialists talking among themselves without knowing what to do, and then made a decision. I'm going to call Julia. Dad, I didn't ask what you think. Harrison turned to his son with a hardness in his eyes that Brett had never seen. You humiliated that woman this morning. You sent her away, calling her useless in front of everyone. And you know what she is? She's the widow of the best mechanic this region ever had. She learned from a master. And while you were in college learning to make PowerPoints, she was here on this ground, with grease up to her elbows, learning how machines really work. But Dad, enough. I'm calling her, and you're going to be quiet. Julia was at the shop finishing changing the spark plugs on a Corolla when the phone rang. It was almost 6 p.m. She looked at the number, Riverside Farm. She stood there watching the phone ring. Part of her wanted to let it go to voicemail, let them drown in their own arrogance. But there was another part, the part that had promised Michael to never give up doing what she knew how to do. That made her answer. Thompson and daughter. Julia. It was Mr. Harrison's voice, and it sounded broken, defeated. I need your help. Silence. Julia, please. I know my son treated you badly today. I know you were humiliated, and I apologize from the bottom of my heart. But I'm desperate here. There are 14 specialists here, and none of them could fix it. The machine will be stopped for 2 more days, while they wait for parts from Illinois. I'm going to go bankrupt, Julia. I'm going to lose everything, and I know your husband knew this machine, and I know you learned from him. Julia closed her eyes. She could simply say no, could make them pay for the humiliation. It would be fair. But then she imagined Michael beside her, that crooked smile, that deep voice saying, "The work speaks louder than prejudice, Jules." I know what's wrong with the machine, she said, surprising even herself. What? How do you know? Not even It's the pressure accumulator in the hydrostatic transmission. Its internal membrane ruptured. The system detects the pressure failure and goes into protection mode, won't even let it start. Silence on the other end. Then, how are you so sure? I am. That machine has had transmission problems since it arrived new. My husband discovered that years ago. The accumulator has over 6 years of intensive use. The membrane has a lifespan of 5 to 7 years. It's time to replace it. It's $100 part. Takes 15 minutes to replace if you know where to look. Another silence. Julia could almost hear Harrison's brain processing. Julia, can you come here now? She looked at the clock, looked at her grease-stained hands, looked at Michael's photo on the wall. I can, but I have conditions. What conditions? Whatever you want. Brett is going to have to apologize to me in front of everyone who was there this morning. All the men who laughed when he called me useless need to hear him apologize. Harrison didn't hesitate for a second. He'll apologize. I guarantee it. He'll do it however you want. What else? If I fix the problem, I want you to tell everyone. I don't want hidden credit. I want every farmer in the region to know that 14 specialists couldn't do it, and that I did, because next time a female mechanic offers help, maybe she'll be heard instead of humiliated. Deal, Julia. I promise. Please come. Julia hung up, stood still for a moment, then went to the cabinet where she kept parts. She pulled out a pressure accumulator for a John Deere. She had 2 in stock, bought years ago when Michael predicted that machine would eventually need them. She grabbed her toolbox and went to the van. As she drove back to Riverside Farm, the sun already low on the horizon painting the sky orange and red, she felt a strange mixture of nervousness and determination. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about fame, it was about dignity. It was about proving that Michael had been right, that mechanics has no gender, that knowledge is worth more than a diploma, that practice is worth more than theory. When she arrived at the farm, there were even more people than in the morning. The 14 technicians and engineers, all the farm's operators and foremen, workers who stayed just to see the outcome. There must have been 30 people there. She got out of the van with her toolbox and the accumulator in hand. Everyone fell silent, watching. Mr. Harrison came to meet her, face red from sun and tension. "Julia, thank you so much for coming. Really. Where's your son?" Harrison signaled. Brett came walking over, and for the first time Julia saw him without all that arrogance. He looked embarrassed, even ashamed. He stopped in front of her, cleared his throat, looked at the ground. "Julia," he said quietly. "Louder," she interrupted, "so everyone can hear." Brett swallowed hard, then lifted his head and spoke louder. "Julia, I apologize for the way I treated you this morning. It was rude, it was unfair, it was prejudiced. You offered help in good faith, and I humiliated you. I'm sorry. It wasn't the most sincere apology in the world, but it was public, and that's what mattered." "I accept," Julia said simply. She walked to the combine. The 14 specialists watched her with expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. Maurice, the John Deere instructor technician, approached. "You told Mr. Harrison it's the pressure accumulator?" "Yes. But we tested the entire transmission. The pressure was normal." "You tested it with the machine stopped and cold. The failure only appears under load with hot oil. It's an intermittent internal seal failure." Maurice frowned, but said nothing. Julia set down the toolbox, climbed onto the machine with agility, and opened the side compartment of the transmission. There it was, fitted in the middle of the complex hydraulic system, the pressure accumulator, a metal cylinder the size of a thermos. She climbed down, got the right tools, climbed back up. In 15 minutes, with precise and confident movements, she removed the old accumulator, installed the new one, closed the compartment. "Does anyone have hydraulic oil here?" she asked. One of the farm mechanics brought a jug. She filled the level, purged the air from the system, wiped her hands with a rag. "Ready, you can test it." Jake, the regular operator, climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. Not just caught, it purred smooth and perfect, as if it had never had a problem. The silence that followed was absolute. 30 people mute, watching as if it were magic. Then slowly applause began. First Mr. Harrison, then Jake, then the other workers, then even the specialists who had failed. Julia climbed down from the machine, wiping her hands, and headed straight to her van. Harrison ran after her. "Julia, how much do I owe you?" She thought about all the humiliation of the morning, thought about how many years it had taken to get here, thought about Michael. $100 for the part, $500 for labor, and the promise you made, "Tell everyone." "I will tell. I'll tell the whole region. You have my word." She got in the van, started it, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, she saw the combine coming back to life, beginning to move slowly toward the cornfield. And she saw all those men still looking at her. For the first time in a long time, Julia Thompson smiled, a wide, genuine smile. "See, Michael," she whispered, "the work spoke louder." If this story touched you, if you want to see more stories like this about people who overcome prejudice through excellence and hard work, please hit that subscribe button. We're working to reach 1,000 subscribers, and every single one helps us continue bringing you these real-life stories of overcoming adversity. It's quick, it's free, and it means the world to us. Click subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a like, and comment where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. Thank you for being here with us at Underrate Mechanics. Until the next story.